Great. Okay. Welcome, everyone. In the next episode, I guess, of our series that we're doing every 2 weeks. If you haven't joined one of these before, they're punchy, so 20 to 30 minutes. We don't want to take too much time. We want to show you how SoterAI works. So we go through some real use cases. And as always, remember any questions you can send in the chat and we'll try to get to them at the end. And the topic of today's webinar is a bit on purposely controversial, but we wanted to get attention. Your safety program might be useless, and we're going to show you how to fix it. Okay, so same two presenters as last time. Myself, I'm the founder. I also run our product team within SOTA. And then I've got my colleague Jessica as well, who is the head of customer success. We've seen the names of the attendees. I think quite a few of you have dealt with Jessica before. So as always, if you've got more questions or follow-ups, you can also contact her at the end of this. Quick reminder on our mission. We want to help change the safety industry within businesses. So we want to help them operate more safely and more efficiently by identifying emerging patterns and enabling proactive incident prevention. And as you all know, we do that with our AI workflows and the AI platform that we've built. The agenda for today, so we're going to talk about from paper to practice. So I think most of us would agree you could have the perfectly written document in a PDF form. You know, your policy could be perfectly built. That doesn't necessarily mean it responds or represents what is happening on the floor, which is where the real risk is and where the real work happens. These documents are often made in offices as well. So people sitting around a desk, theorizing what's happening in the workplace doesn't always represent what happens in the actual workplace. And within SoterAI, we wanted to help solve that. So firstly, we do want these documents to be correct. These policy documents, safety program documents, compliance is important. So we're going to show you a couple of examples of like how SoterAI can assist with that. But more importantly, we want these documents and then the application of these documents to represent what is actually happening on the floor, what's actually happening to the people that are doing the real work. And we do that through the risk intelligence layer within our platform. So the risk intelligence layer is something we're very proud of within SoterAI. It makes us different to other generic AI solutions. And what risk intelligence is it builds a live picture of your risk within your business. Last time we showed people, how you ingest data into SoterAI and how we create this risk intelligence layer. I think we'll briefly go into that again, just to show you the result of risk intelligence. So you can see, the contextual awareness that our platform has of our clients' workspaces. And what we're going to show you, especially today, is how we can use this risk intelligence to bridge the gap, bridge the gap between what is written in the documents and what's actually happening out in the workplace. And that helps safety professionals and risk professionals act on their real risk profile and not just audit documents. So with that, I hand over to Jess, who will take it from here.
Thank you, Matt. I am just going to share my screen now. Bear with me. So hi, everyone. It's nice to be here. And thank you for joining our second webinar in this series. To get started with this webinar, I just want to do a quick recap on the risk intelligence layer and how to set that up. So I'm sharing my screen now on the final product of the dashboard. As mentioned, the way to add the records and to add the information to the risk intelligence is to go into here, the data sources section. You would add in all of your policies, procedures, risk assessments, incident data, hazard reporting data, anything that you have in the business that's going to be really good to enhance the AI's understanding of your risk. Once you do go in and add those to there, you can process them then, and they will go into the risk intelligence layer, which then what it does is it processes all of that information, it ingests it, it combines it, it develops risk scenarios, which will give you an understanding of what types of risks your business is facing. It'll provide you with the linked controls, the incidents, it'll give you an annual assumed cost based on the incident data that you've uploaded, and a risk score. And as mentioned in our previous webinar, this risk intelligence dashboard acts as almost like a control gap analysis where you can see whether the controls or the hazards or risks are winning. So when we think about risk intelligence, it's always about that battle. We always want the controls to win. And from there, you've got an almost hot list or a hit list of the types of risks that need to be actioned. And then what we mentioned in our previous webinar is actually using that information, that data, getting some really good insights into the types of tasks and assessments that you're doing. So I have an example of a policy review document that I got the AI to process. Now, to get started, you do have to click on the review policy workflow. On your dashboards, it will probably be down in the documentation section. So I've actually put a star on mine, so it populates at the top. The first step is to click on the regulation you want it to assess against, and then you click Use Now. Now, I have a pre-populated assessment done for a forklift policy that I added to the system. So this forklift policy, what I did first is do the OSHA specific compliance assessment against it. And what it does is it takes you through the process to add that document. It gives you some prompts on what types of things that it needs. From there, you'll get a document report that looks like this. So in this forklift policy, there was clearly some gaps. So what it's done is it's actually reviewed that entire policy and it's gone the top priority actions that are against the OSHA regulations. Now, you don't always have to click OSHA. You can click other regulations. You can add in more, but for the purposes of this example, I've chosen OSHA. From there, it gives you a compliance summary. It gives you some links to some regulations and some sections on the page where these regulations might have a gap. As you can see, they have compliance sections, which is green, which is telling you this section is compliant. If there's a partial gap, which means that there are some instances where there is conflicting information based on what is required and what you have documented. And in this case, there are no clear gaps. So if I scroll down on this report, it also breaks all of these findings down into more detail. So it gives you the status of what the issue is. It gives you the regulatory requirements. So this is actually a direct quote from the actual regulation. So in this case, OSHA 1910-178. I won't read the whole thing, but essentially it gives you the evaluation. So it tells you what the policy actually states, and obviously the regulation that is in non-compliance with that. It also provides you with recommendations, so things that you can do to update that policy to be compliant, which is a big thing for a lot of our partners, is ensuring that your documentation is up to date. I'm sure there's quite a few people in this meeting, and all of our partners have always said the biggest pain point in their day is reviewing documents. It's not a fun thing to do. It's not something that takes 2 seconds. It's a very time-consuming process. And that's what we've aimed to reduce the amount of time spent on these types of tasks is with AI. So each of these have, again, the same regulatory requirement, that direct quote, evaluation, and suggestions and required changes and additional recommendations. Now, the next part of this, which is actually pulling in that risk intelligence layer. And when I talked about the risk intelligence, I also want to point out that it not only helps you understand the risk in your business, it helps give you some proactive insights into not just what's currently on the page, on the piece of paper, it's also about what's actually happening in your business. So what I did was I asked it, I'll scroll down to my prompt if everyone can see that. So in this prompt, I've asked it to research my risk intelligence, which I have already pre-built out. Provide me with some key findings and recommendations that should be updated in the document. So not just the compliance elements, but also, is there controls that I'm missing? Is there incidents still occurring where controls aren't effective? Is there more that I can do to actually mitigate the risks that my business is facing? So what it does is it goes in, it researches that full risk intelligence, it understands what types of incidents, controls, and risk scenarios are linked to this type of forklift policy. And what it does is it provides you with a full breakdown of all of the types of risks that could be related. So in this suggestion, it's given me a few different key findings. So risk of injury to vehicle operators from sudden stops or collisions. That's one of my highest risks. It goes into all of the other risks that could be related to this policy. And then what it does is it also provides you with some recommendations. So these would be additional risk mitigation recommendations. So as you can see, it says require immediate report of all injuries, near misses, and symptoms, because one of the risk scenarios said that there was risk of re-aggravation of an injury after not reporting it on time. I'm sure we've all had those before. There's a few other recommendations, and what it does is it adds that into the compliance report as well. So down the bottom here, it's showing you exactly that information. It provides you in the report as well as on the chat interface as well. It gives you some policy updates and controls, so actionable recommendations. So mandate immediate blame-free reporting of all injuries, symptoms, and near misses. That's one of the big ones. Specify a daily pre-use equipment inspection with clear criteria, and so on. So as you can see, not only have we done that compliance assessment against the OSHA regulation, and like I said, you can do this against any regulation that is available. So if you had other jurisdictions, say if you wanted to specify just for the state that you're operating in, it will be able to tailor that report specific to that location. So moving along, after this, all this information came to me, I also wanted to go to that next step. And the next step was to update my original policy. So it's all great that we get this information, these recommendations. It's actually writing the policy again or rewriting it that's taking a lot of time as well. So again, AI is magical, and I asked it to update the policy, enhance my original document, incorporating all of the recommendations from both a compliance perspective and risk intelligence recommendations. I went more specific. I said, be sure to rewrite only in those sections and provide me with a document that I can send out to my business. So again, this task, rewriting a whole policy, and in this situation, it was only about, I'd say, 10 to 20 pages. Obviously, the policies and procedures that you would have could be much longer. And again, that takes so much time to rewrite. So what it did was it completely reconfigured my document, and I'll open that up here. And this is essentially my new forklift policy and procedure. So it went through and it edited all of the sections that it needed to with the recommendations that it provided. It goes through the entire procedure for all of the different elements. It tells you if that section has been updated, so you can always delete that section. It tells you if it's new, gives you references, employer responsibilities, and so on and so forth. So this final document is what then can be used in your business. You can download it as a docx or a PDF, and you can also publish it. Now, I've already published this one, so I'll show you what that button looks like. But once you have got a final complete document, we have this button here that will actually publish that into the SoterAI data sources. And that means that that document is now part of the private knowledge base for your business. So when you interact with the AI, it's going to use this new document, but it also can be processed into the risk intelligence to update those risk scenarios. So say in this document, you've documented controls that you've now put in place. That's going to affect some of those risk scenarios. There's additional controls there. So you would click this button, and I'll go to my data sources. And what you'll see is that now populates in your internal data section. So that is a new forklift policy and procedure for my business. Now, as you can see, we have a few buttons. As I mentioned in our last webinar, we have enabled, meaning that it's in the actual private knowledge base of the AI, meaning that any assessment that you do in the platform is going to use that as private information. And again, it doesn't get shared externally. Anything you put in SoterAI, there are strict controls so that nothing goes outside of the ether. And then this button here is what you'll want to click to process that into the risk intelligence. So as you can see, it'll go yellow. In this case, I have already reached my limit, but you will see that it will go yellow and it'll start processing. And what you'll notice is that this risk intelligence dashboard, once you have actually processed that new document, it'll start to update the score for those risks. So when you put in place controls, there are obviously the scale when we're looking at risks and controls. If we're weighting the controls lever, then we're going to see that these scores start to reduce. So that's a really good proactive way to actually mitigate some of these risks and action those controls. Additionally, there is another way that you can use this document. So this is my final document that I've created, and AI has really supported me with that. If you are wanting to do an assessment against it, say you have a video or a photo of someone doing work with a forklift and you want to just do an internal audit for yourself to make sure that what they're doing in that photo or video is compliant with not only OSHA, but of course the mitigation controls that you've put in place. You would go over to one of the workflows. Let's use hazard inspection as an example. You would click on the selection of the regulations, and this company specific section is where it's going to do the assessment based on just your internal information. So think being able to understand if your company or the person that's operating the forklift, are they actually operating it according to your documentation? And I know that's always such a hard thing in wide, large businesses. You have these great documents, as Matt said, that sit probably in an office. They might just be on someone's computer in a PDF or the internal company intranet page. It's hard to disseminate that across the workforce. And having the ability for SoterAI to actually have that embedded in its private knowledge is really going to standardize the operations across all of your sites. So that's pretty much all I wanted to show you today. I think, Matt, if you want to take over, I think we're going to open up for questions.
Yeah, if someone wants to write questions in the Q&A, that would be good. I actually don't have any at the moment, which is good. Last time we had quite a few, so maybe we're getting good at explaining this sort of stuff. What Jess showed at the end, I might just talk 1 minute more on that. The hazard inspection. Effectively, what she was describing was a verification of controls, and I think that's a really exciting use of the platform that I'm seeing more and more. So as again we mentioned, you can have a great document, you can have all the controls that you want to have in place within that document, but being able to go out in the field, taking photos, taking video of particular tasks that are being done, forklifts is this example, but there's a lot more complex ones around confined spaces, for example, or lockout, tag out, and stuff like that. So being able to film or take photos of things that people are doing out in the workplace, and then verifying that the controls are actually in place. I'm expecting to see a lot more use of that into the future, and yeah, I think that's super exciting. We got our first question. So, will SoterAI recognize misspelled critical control phrases and sentences? How will it react to a nonsense phrase or sentence? Nonsense, yeah. So I think, what if you've got something in your document that completely doesn't make sense? It's a really good question. I don't know exactly. I think it will highlight if something is wrong. So if something is just completely written where it's wrong, it will ask that. It will highlight that, I would say. In terms of like understanding what the document says, maybe just go back into that last workflow that you did with the policy review. So, if that's one of the things that you're concerned about, you could literally just ask it. So Jess could ask the question here, and Jess, I think you should, just check this document for readability or making it easier for my people to understand or something like that. And it will reanalyze that document again, and it will highlight, is it understandable? Does it make sense? And I know some of these documents can be quite technical, and that doesn't always translate well to people out in the field. And I think one of the things that if you've highlighted that's an issue, then rewriting your documents through our tool for readability and understandability, I think would be a great use of the tool. So I think what we're going to get here is a whole bunch of things where it says that doesn't you could write this better.
And generally
Um,
speaking, if I've just to add on to that, if I've sent a prompt and I misspell one of my prompts, it is intuitive enough to understand the actual word that it's trying to say.
yeah, I think you got to ask this question. So you've got a response. Okay, so it's given three examples of what it suggests you could do, and then you, like Jess did before, you could literally say rewrite my document with these three things in mind, and it will do that. It'll do that. Got the next question. So one of our team members identified that they had loaded a large amount of our standard programs into SOTA. Is this only available to the individual, or do I need it to be added to the larger group? So everything that you put into data sources is available within that workspace. So it's available to everybody. When you process it into risk intelligence, it's also available to everybody. So they could go in and they could see that risk intelligence layer that Jess showed you before. But I think even more importantly, everyone who's doing one of these workflows within SoterAI will refer to that risk intelligence layer. Uh, and if I see the question, Jay, the follow up, and if it's not working exactly like you expected, like let's follow up with Jess after this call, and we'll figure out exactly what's going on. But it should be available for everyone. So potentially, maybe that person didn't process it properly within data sources to get to the risk intelligence layer.
That would be my suggestion as well, is just to make sure that this button here has a tick on it to make sure that that information is processed. And then the risk intelligence, it will take some time to process and ingest all of that data, but it will show there once you've got that as a green tick.
Okay, super.
I wanted to add one
Um,
more use case. Just, I don't have an example of it, but just to give you guys an idea, obviously I did this example on a forklift policy, which is very strict. It is very kind of specific to that one kind of element. But say you have a full safety program for the entire business, your safety management system, that document has documented all of the different risks in your business, and you want to see if there's actually something that you're missing. If you did a policy review against that document, which would be much more than 10, 20 pages, that would actually systematically review the information, the content, find if there's risks that are processed in the risk intelligence that haven't been covered in that document, and it'll actually help you kind of build out your safety management system even more. And that's all I wanted to share. Sorry, Matt, you go.
yeah, super. Um, okay, we don't have any more questions, and we really do want to keep this punchy. So we'll end the session there. Again, reminder, follow up with Jess if you've got specific questions. We're really proud of risk intelligence. We've seen really, really good use cases of it. It's what makes our AI system special, understanding that context of your business. The amount of processing that goes into building risk intelligence is insane. Very often to process all that information can take hours. I've even seen it take over a day to process the information. So it's a really clever way to process a lot of data. So if you're not using it or you've got questions on how to use it, please do let us know. Thank you. Thanks, Jess.
Thanks. Thanks,
Yeah.
everyone.